In the quiet, unassuming town of Elmwood, where crime seemed to be a distant notion, the residents were about to be confronted with a nightmare they could never have anticipated. This is the story of Elisa Walters, a 25-year-old woman who disappeared without a trace, leaving the town gripped in fear as dark truths began to emerge. What began as a routine missing persons case soon unraveled into something far more sinister. With every twist and turn, the tension grew. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers began to wonder if they truly knew those around them. As we delve deeper into the events leading up to Elisa's disappearance, we will uncover the chilling revelations that shocked the entire community, forever changing the way they viewed safety and trust. It was a regular autumn evening when Elisa Walters, an outgoing and well-liked young woman, was last seen. She had been out for dinner with friends, enjoying the warmth of familiar faces in the cozy confines of a local diner. As the evening came to a close, Elisa hugged her friends goodbye and headed home, walking down the familiar streets she had known all her life. But Elisa never made it home. When her parents reported her missing the next morning, no one was overly alarmed. Elmwood was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors, where everyone knew everyone. However, as hours turned into days with no sign of Elisa, the anxiety in the town grew palpable. Flyers were distributed, search parties organized, and the police combed through the nearby woods. Yet, there were no leads, only a growing sense of unease. As the days stretched into weeks, the investigation took on an increasingly desperate tone. Detectives interviewed Elisa's friends, neighbors, and co-workers, but no one could offer more than vague recollections of her plans. It seemed as if she had simply vanished into thin air. However, there was one detail that piqued the investigators' interest. Elisa had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Martin Blake, a local handyman known for his quiet demeanor and seemingly ordinary life. Those who knew him described Martin as polite, though somewhat reserved. His relationship with Elisa had been the talk of the town at one point, but in recent months they had grown distant, eventually leading to their breakup. Despite this, no one could have predicted what was about to be uncovered. When police first questioned Martin, he appeared cooperative, but his story seemed rehearsed. He claimed he had not seen Elisa in weeks and knew nothing about her disappearance. Yet something didn't sit right with the investigators. They began to dig deeper into his past and found unsettling details that would turn the investigation on its head. A crucial break in the case came when one of Elisa's close friends, Jenny, recalled an unsettling incident that had occurred just a few days before Elisa went missing. Elisa had confided in Jenny that she felt like someone was watching her. At first, they both laughed it off as paranoia, but Elisa had insisted the feeling was real. She had noticed strange occurrences. Her belongings slightly moved. An unfamiliar car parked near her house for hours. It was enough to cause Elisa to change her routine, leaving work through the back door and varying her usual routes home. This new information shifted the focus of the investigation. Detectives now wondered if Elisa had been the target of something far more deliberate. Their suspicions grew when they received an anonymous tip from a neighbor who claimed to have seen Martin lurking near Elisa's house the night she disappeared. This lead was enough to obtain a warrant to search Martin Blake's property, and what they found behind the closed doors of his seemingly ordinary home left the entire community reeling. As the police entered Martin's small, unremarkable house, they were struck by the unsettling aura that seemed to cling to the walls. The interior was dark, with the blinds drawn tightly shut, and the air was heavy with an uncomfortable stillness. In the basement, they made a discovery that would send shockwaves through Elmwood. Hidden behind a stack of old boxes, they found a room. It wasn't large, but it had been meticulously prepared. The walls were lined with soundproofing material, the windows covered with thick black curtains. In the center of the room, there was a single chair bolted to the floor, and scattered around the space were various tools and items that suggested Elisa had been held there. The realization hit everyone involved in the search with a heavy, sickening thud. This was no longer a case of a missing person. It was the scene of a heinous crime, one that had been carried out with chilling premeditation. News of this discovery spread like wildfire. The people of Elmwood, a community once bound by trust and safety, were now gripped by fear and disbelief. How could something so horrific have happened in their town. Martin Blake, the quiet man who fixed fences and mowed lawns, was now at the center of the most terrifying mystery they had ever encountered. For many, it wasn't just the crime itself that was horrifying. It was the idea that such evil had been lurking among them, unnoticed. Parents no longer allowed their children to play outside unsupervised, and neighbors who once greeted each other warmly now looked at one another with suspicion. Trust had been shattered, replaced by an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. In the days following the discovery, Martin Blake was arrested, though he continued to maintain his innocence. It wasn't until weeks later, after intense questioning and the mounting pressure of evidence, that Martin finally confessed. But it wasn't the straightforward admission of guilt that many had expected. Instead, he offered a chilling account that sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened detectives. Martin claimed that he had become obsessed with Elisa after their breakup. He couldn't accept that she had moved on, and over time, his fixation grew darker. He began watching her, following her, convinced that if he could just keep her close, he could regain control. That obsession led him to plan and execute her kidnapping, and though he initially claimed it was a mistake, his methodical actions suggested otherwise. Martin's confession painted a portrait of a man who had descended into a dark, twisted fantasy world, one in which Elisa was no longer a person but an object to be possessed. His inability to accept reality had devastating consequences, not just for Elisa, but for the entire town. Although Martin Blake was convicted, the case left behind a series of unanswered questions. What drove him to such extremes? Were there signs that had been missed by those around him? Could this have been prevented? These lingering doubts weighed heavily on the minds of Elmwood's residents. The trial brought some closure, but the scars left by Elisa's disappearance and the revelation of Martin's hidden life would remain for years to come. In the aftermath of the case, Elmwood would never be the same. The town, once defined by its close-knit community and quiet streets, had become a place marked by fear and uncertainty. The events surrounding Elisa's disappearance served as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface, even in the most ordinary of places. Local leaders and community members came together in the wake of the tragedy, hosting town meetings, safety workshops, and mental health seminars to try and rebuild trust. However, the sense of innocence that once characterized Elmwood had been forever altered. For true crime enthusiasts, the case of Elisa Walters is a chilling exploration of obsession, control, and the fragile nature of trust within a community. It is a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come from those we least expect. As we reflect on the tragedy of Elisa Walters and the devastating impact it had on her community, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance and compassion. Crimes like these often leave lasting marks on those left behind, not just in the form of grief, but in the form of questions about safety, about human nature, and about how we can protect ourselves from the hidden dangers that sometimes lurk closer than we think. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into true crime cases that reveal the dark side of human nature. Stay safe and always trust your instincts.